Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This video is about The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. So this is a book review that's part of my ongoing project connecting to banned books. So this was started by MJ at Reading This Life, and at the time she called it 24BB, but we're in 2025 now. So the idea was to read 24 banned or challenged books in 2024, but I'm still keeping it going because I didn't get to 24 anyway, but also it's an important thing to do, and this was on my radar straight away, and I read this through December into half of January, or almost half of January, and I buddy read this with Kim from Middle of the Book March. It was a fantastic experience, and I definitely recommend buddy reading, especially books like this, which are so nuanced, so layered, so complicated, so much to say. Buddy reading is a really good thing to do for books like this, and Kim in particular, absolutely lovely person, fantastic booktuber, really good experience. My favorite experience so far with buddy reading, so big shout out to Kim. And this book was an absolute revelation. So I don't normally read books that are almost 600 pages. So I was a little bit like, and I didn't really want it to last forever, but you know, it kept inviting me back in, and it was just beautifully written. Came out in 1952, and ultimately, there are many things it covers, but probably, obviously, I'm not sure, I don't know how much you know of its reputation, but the main thing that it covers, that its main theme is race. So, this is the story from a perspective of a black man in the 50s and before, and his experiences, first in the college he works at in a small town, and then he gets an opportunity to go to New York, and he takes a letter with him, and he goes to these different people to try and get a job based on this letter that he's been given by the dean of the college. And he thinks that letter is saying something that it actually isn't saying, and basically a lot of the book is set in New York once he establishes what he's going to do on the back of the letter, and he goes through all these different encounters, but he works through his identity and his purpose and his place in society through his own definition of being an invisible man. And that's really important. It's not a massively obscure metaphor. Clearly, you know what he's talking about when he describes himself as an invisible man. But this isn't a man that spends the entire book ignored. He's actually used by everybody that he meets. He's abused sometimes. Sometimes it's horrific, the treatment he gets. He's exploited for the entire book. And one of the things that I find quite interesting about the book is that all the way through the book, he's got this positivity and this naivety, and he keeps expecting good things. And spoilers, good things do not happen very often to this man. And they do happen, but they are absolutely swamped with bad stuff. And he is fully exploited by everybody he sees. And actually, it's not just men, but women exploit him as well. And it's not just white men, although a lot of them are white men. It's also the black characters that he meets are also exploiting him as well. And it's a really interesting and nuanced journey that he goes through. At the beginning, he describes himself as an invisible man. He says he's going to recount his story, and he's going to explain why he is invisible and how that informs what he does. So that's kind of how he sets it up. And then he starts talking about his job at the college, and he's a driver for a while for these white men. And already in the first little bit of the book, you've got a real strong identity, and you've got the white privilege being put out on the page, and this unnamed narrator, first person narrator, being exploited straight away, and also being chastised for taking a white part of a college to a poor part of the black community, and being shown a negative side of the black experience. And he doesn't just get chastised for it. It's awful what happens to him in this first part of the book. And one of the most memorable and upsetting parts of the book is this battle royale that he gets involved in. And he goes to it completely and naively, thinking it's a positive experience. And it's horrible, that scene. And there are many parts of the book where it is horrible what he experiences, but he does learn from it, because he's very naive, but he does learn from it. And he does have this journey through the book. And once he gets to New York and he discovers that he is literally on his own, I won't tell you how or why, but he's got to approach New York with a fresh state of mind and a fresh purpose. Once he's realised this, he does start being more proactive about his role in society and the black experience. And it's phenomenal. It's so brilliantly written, because what happens is he ends up getting involved in a group of activists called the Brotherhood. And I won't tell you what happens, but it's very complicated. It's not as simple as he becomes a part of this activist group and things start looking up. It's not like that at all. It's you just don't know what's going to happen next, even though clearly you are probably aware of the general point of the book. But how the book tells that story, I think, is quite unique. So, yeah, I couldn't recommend this enough. The way it's written is also really beautiful. There are some passages, especially in the early part of the book, say the first half of the book, where it kind of becomes like dreamlike and almost psychedelic, if you like, in some of the ways that it becomes very metaphorical, and it's like he's daydreaming. And there's a moment early on when he plays a jazz record, and that's one of the moments where it goes into that state. The writing, it does less of that when he gets to New York and things start really kicking off and it gets more big in scale. But in the early part, when he keeps thinking and reflecting on his experience and for example the way that jazz affects him, then you get this sort of dreamlike thing, which is beautifully written, but it can be too much a little bit in the first half. So there was one chapter in particular I thought it was too much of that, but you know, it's a very large book, so it was a very small part of the book that I thought had too much of that. And the other thing I was going to say was that there's a really interesting change in pace through the book as well. So it's very consistent in its quality. So the way it's written is absolutely consistent. But one thing that does change is the rhythm of the book. So it's got quite a slow pace to begin with, although things are happening all the time. But I'd say first couple of 100 pages, it's got these different scenes where he's encountering these different people. And it's almost like every time he meets somebody, with the exception of the Battle Royale section, there's this sort of encounter with someone significant in the scene that's sort of teaching him something, or he's becoming more aware of a situation. But as things go on, the scale gets bigger and the pace changes and the rhythm changes, and the book becomes a lot more proactive, if you like, in its pace. So I think that's an interesting observation as well about the book. But the role of women in the book is actually quite marginalised. So there are a few women in the book, but it's a big book, and they don't occur very often. And they tend to have a specific point to be there in the book, but their roles are quite surprising. Their roles are a little bit dated, and obviously the level of inclusion is dated, but I think it does fit with the time that it's written, and I don't think there's a It's not a deliberately negative portrayal of women, but it is a negative portrayal of women. But I think it's really more about the time it was written rather than a deliberately misogynistic streak in the writing or something. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And there is a couple of encounters he has with women that are quite surprising as well. Again, I don't want to spoil things, but yeah, the last line of the book, which I don't think I'm going to be spoiling anything if I tell you, that the last line of the book really spells out what Ralph Ellison is trying to do. Because basically, I won't quote it, but the meaning of the line is that we have to listen to the invisible people. We have to listen to their stories. We have to listen to their perspective. We have to listen to their experiences and learn from them. And I think this book does a great job of doing that. So I thoroughly recommend it. It is hard going sometimes. Sometimes it's quite violent, and you might get frustrated by the main character with his naivety, but that's part of the charm of it. But also, I think it's important. I think because if this unnamed first person narrator was really antagonistic and much stronger, I don't know if the message would be as clear. So yeah, thoroughly recommend it, as I say. Let me know down below if you've read this, and thanks a lot for watching. Stay curious, everybody.
Paint me a picture